And welcome to The Verdict this Sunday morning. As you can see, well, you can't see, but I am by myself for the moment on the set. Mick Cornett's not here today. He will be gone a couple of weeks, but we'll be looking forward to getting him back soon. He's doing city business. Today we're going to be talking about something that we talk about every 2 years. It's the Oklahoma Women's Summit. It's a very important event that takes place in Oklahoma City, discussing the opportunities of women, the problems that women face particularly. And we've got two people joining us again this year that were with us 2 years ago when we talked about the 2006 summit. They'll be telling us about the upcoming 2008 summit. I think you'll find it fascinating. We will give you enough information in advance of the summit to let you know how to participate. So we're glad you're here with us. I think you're going to enjoy this show. Let's take a break, and we'll be back with you in just a few minutes with our guests.
Every day America uses clean-burning natural gas instead of coal or oil is a day of victory for our environment. That's why Chesapeake chose to explore for natural gas exclusively, and we've never looked back. Because natural gas burns twice as clean as oil or coal, and reducing carbon emissions to combat potential global warming is every bit as urgent as cutting our dependence on energy imports. As America's #1 driller of new gas wells, Chesapeake is moving fast to find untapped reserves of natural gas here at home. It's the right fuel for America's economy and the fuel for a clean air future. We just happen to be early to see it so clearly. Chesapeake, natural gas wins the day.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Kent Myers filling in for my able partner, Mick Cornett, who's gone for a couple of weeks doing city business. So feel safe if you live in Oklahoma City. Your interests are being looked out for by my partner, Mick Cornett. Today we're honored to have return visits from two guests that have visited with us a couple of years ago about the 2006 Oklahoma Women's Summit. To my left is Lou Kohlman. Lou was appointed to the Oklahoma Commission on the Status of Women, which is the sponsoring organization for this summit. She was appointed a couple of years ago, and she is the secretary at the current time of that commission. She did her undergraduate work at Rice University and her law work at Harvard Law School. She's a staff attorney in the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals here in Oklahoma. She's a past president of the Oklahoma County League of Women Voters. And she is a source of a lot of information for us for various shows, but we're really thrilled to have Lou back for another visit. Welcome.
Thank you.
Glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here.
To my right is also a person that we're pleased to have back, the Honorable Patricia Presley. She is the Oklahoma County Court Clerk, has been for a number of years. She did her undergraduate work at Southern Nazarene University and obtained a master's degree from the University of Oklahoma. Since 1996, she has been the Oklahoma County Court Clerk. And I might point out that that particular office is the largest and busiest court clerk office in the state of Oklahoma. She manages it well. I oftentimes have a lot of dealings with that office, and it's extremely well run. She is a former chairperson of the Oklahoma Commission on the Status of Women. This is also her second visit. And by the way, I might note since she's here, that I have heard through the grapevine that she is planning on running for another term as a candidate for re-election to the Oklahoma County Court Clerk position. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct, Kent, and thank you very much for mentioning that.
Well, you're very welcome. The voters have been well served by you, and I'm sure would be again in the future. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's just delightful to be back.
Well, let's start off by talking, if we can, about the Commission on the Status of Women. Tell us what that is.
The Oklahoma Commission on the Status of Women was created by legislature in 1994. It consists of 30 women who live throughout the state, and these women are appointed by the Secretary Pro Tem, the President of the Senate, and the Governor, 10 of each. And we meet monthly to discuss issues and try to issues pertaining to women and the status of women in the state of Oklahoma, and try to affect legislature to the benefit of women and children in the state.
Now, you have this summit coming up, but that's a biennial event, I guess. You do it every 2 years?
Every 2 years, that's right. And this year, of course, is the year that we will have the summit. And then on the other off years, we have the Oklahoma Women's Hall of Fame.
Well, we want to right now invite you back to the Oklahoma Women's Hall of Fame, although it's a year from now.
That's
well,
right.
thank you very much.
We'd love to have you back.
And we will be delighted to be there. Just as an idea, last time we had an Oklahoma Women's Hall of Fame was in 2007. Yes. And some of the people we put in that year were Sherry Cole, we all know who that is, yes. Jenny Creveling, Dr. Joanna Hibbler, Maxine Horner, Dr. Kay Martin, Terry Neese, Claudia Tarrington, Dr. Carolyn Taylor, and Darren Della Warrior. So we get a broad cross-section of women from all over the state in all kinds of areas. And that's a pretty representative section. We've had Vicki Miles LaGrange, all sorts of women whose names you would recognize and who have been honored in the Hall of Fame.
That's great recognition. Where is the Hall of Fame itself located?
The Hall of Fame doesn't exist so much as a physical entity as it does an expression of thanks and gratitude from the Commission on the Status of Women. Now, the Oklahoma Women's Almanac, which we may talk about a little bit later in connection with the summit, has a listing of the women on the Hall of Fame, and it can also be found on the Oklahoma Commission on the Status of Women website.
Well, let's get to that. Let's talk about, now, when is the Women's Summit?
The Women's Summit, Kent, is going to be held on Friday, April the 25th, and it will be at the state capitol, which is a lovely venue because there's plenty of room, and we're going to be holding at least one of our sessions in the House chamber. And for many people, it's the first time that they ever get to see the chamber, let alone get to actually sit in some of the desks that belong to the legislators.
It's a one-day event, I take it.
It is. It is a one-day event.
Now, I know that you can go online and register for the event.
You can go online and register, and I think that you'll have our website on the screen here before too long.
We
but
will.
I encourage people to go to Google if they don't remember the website address, and Google the Oklahoma Commission on the Status of Women, and they'll find all kinds of information about the summit and a registration.
Speaking of all kinds of information, you have brought me your personal copy of the Oklahoma Women's Almanac. I'd like to get a picture of that if we can. And Lou, tell us about this publication.
Well, the Oklahoma Women's Almanac was published in 2006. It was a joint venture between the Oklahoma Commission on the Status of Women and the Women's Archives at Oklahoma State University. And right now I should say that the commission is actually composed of both men and women. We think of it as women, but we do actually have a male commissioner.
Professor Darcy.
Professor Darcy, who was instrumental in putting together the Oklahoma Women's Almanac with Commissioner Jennifer Postenbaugh, who's also affiliated with OSU. This has everything you can possibly think of regarding women in Oklahoma, from the list of women in the Hall of Fame, to other important women and events in our state, to essays about women, to sports scores, high school sports scores from every women's sport you can think of, tennis, track, basketball, it's all in there.
How does one obtain a copy?
Well, one easy way to obtain a copy is when you register to come to the summit. on the bottom of the registration form, there will be a form where you can order your very own copy of the Oklahoma Women's Almanac.
And it costs how much?
It costs $24.95.
And when you show up for the summit, it'll be handed to you?
When you show up for the summit, it'll be there. It'll be handed to you. We can't actually sell, and wouldn't want to actually sell volumes at the state capitol, but we can make them available if you had pre-registered.
Very good. Good publication. You were kind enough, I don't know whether you recall or not, 2 years ago to furnish me a copy, and I have it and refer to it every once in a while. And it does contain a lot of good information. Let's get right to the summit now, and let's talk about the opening session. Who are the participants going to be? And you've got kind of a special guest at the opening.
We do.
Ceremony.
Our special guest at the opening ceremony is going to be Congresswoman Mary Fallin, who is available to speak to the group, and she's going to give a general welcome. We'll also have a welcome from our co-chairs who are actually handling the summit, Dina Fisher and Kathy Houston, and various legislators who are members of the commission chair. But then Congresswoman Fallin is going to come in and speak to the group on issues pertaining to women as she sees them, as she has dealt with them in her political career, and I expect as she is seeing them now on the national level. Give everybody a little bit broader perspective, and then we'll focus in the rest of the day on Oklahoma itself.
Let me digress back to the 2006 summit for just a second. Just approximately what kind of attendance did you have?
We had probably about 350 women.
Really?
And men.
And you're expecting about the same for this year?
I expect at least that many this year, yeah.
Well, what we want to do is get to Patricia in just a minute to talk about the second part of the program on a very important subject, women incarcerated in Oklahoma. But for now, let's take a little break, hear from our sponsors, take a deep breath and come back, and we'll rejoin you in just a few minutes. You're watching The Verdict.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
That land next door was a mess. Take more than a lawnmower to revive that land. I heard the oil and natural gas people was cleaning up old oil sites, and it wouldn't cost us a flood nickel. Oh yes, sir, it was quite a revival. The whole church showed up, want to make a playground for the kids. It sure is a blessing.
Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate. We're accountants. We do taxes, business valuations, estate planning, and consulting. And we're right here in Oklahoma, working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Steve Wilsey and Stuart Meyer have the resources and the experience. Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate in Oklahoma City and Tulsa.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Kent Myers. We're visiting here with two very interesting guests today, Lou Kohlman and Patricia Presley from the Oklahoma Women's Summit, 2008 edition. We were talking, Patricia, before we went on the break, a little bit about some of the things that are going to be on the program. I know that there's going to be a portion of the program on the women incarcerated in Oklahoma. We've done a whole show on that before. We know, I think our viewers probably know, that Oklahoma is #1 in incarcerating women. What does the Women's Summit want to focus on this area?
Well, the Commission is always interested in educating the public, educating people in Oklahoma to let them know that Oklahoma does stand #1 in the nation in incarcerating women. We lost that distinction for a year, a couple of years ago to Mississippi, but we've got it back. So I think just to talk to people about the reason that we're incarcerating women, which is there's no any one reason, there's just a multitude of reasons, and then what the alternative is, and that translates to alternative sentencing. And so we're going to be talking about that.
Well, I notice on the program you're going to have District Attorney David Prater speak on alternative sentencing. He's been on our show a couple of times talking about that, as has Judge Hubbard, the special judge who I guess supervises drug court in Oklahoma County. Tell me from your perspective as a former chairperson of the commission, how do you see alternative sentencing improving the incarceration situation?
Well, it's working, #1, contrary to anything that has come out in recent reports and so on. Certainly in Oklahoma County, it is working. And the idea is to address the problem as opposed to just incarcerating people and hoping that the problem goes away, because it doesn't. What that translates to is 12-step program, because most of these people are drug abusers, alcohol abusers. So if we can at least address that issue, then there's a great possibility for them to be successful in society without having to go to prison.
Lou, let me throw this question to you on that same subject. We have some statutory entitlements to alternative sentencing.
Yes.
Do we have enough? Do we need more legislation that would allow courts broader discretion in this area?
Well, I think that it would help if we had, I think that there are some legislative fixes that can, and I anticipate over the years will be made, certainly should be made. There's more funding that can be available, and quite frankly, I think that the Oklahoma Supreme Court has under its rulemaking authority, has the power at this point to promulgate some statewide rules for drug courts in particular, which would allow them to be used more efficiently should the court wish to take up that mantle and do that. One of the reasons that we're talking about alternative sentencing and drug court in particular when dealing with incarceration of women, we all know this, but I thought I might mention it for your viewers, is that although there are a multitude of reasons why women are incarcerated at such a high rate, many of them do have to do with drugs, substance abuse problems, things of that nature. And that's the reason that we wind up looking at these alternatives and trying to put people in drug courts, mental health courts, other alternatives, community sentencing, other alternatives to prison, is because if we can, as Patricia says, get to the root of those problems, people that go through drug courts are significantly less likely to reoffend.
Well, Patty, let me ask you this. We've had drug courts or alternative sentencing now around long enough to be able to assess some of the results, as you just pointed out, reoffending. How do women generally do in alternative sentencing arrangements as opposed to how men do?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Not surprisingly, women have a fewer recidivism rate than do men. And if you were to ask me why that is, I could only speculate as to why that was.
But it seems to be working better in the female population from a recidivism standpoint than in the male population.
It absolutely is, and women tend to find it easier to find jobs and to hold those jobs. And it could be because they have little hungry mouths to feed, at 5 o'clock when they go home. But whatever the reason, we're happy that we do have success with both the male and female population.
We've done shows in the past on the meth problem in Oklahoma and some of the solutions that were enacted a couple of years ago to get some of the ingredients off the shelf, with the hope that the meth involvement would go down. And if that went down, we also were told that there might be some reduction in the incarceration of women rate. But I take it that while we have made great strides in the eradicating meth as a problem in Oklahoma,
We have.
But the corresponding reduction in incarceration of women has not occurred.
I don't know whether there has been enough time passed in between the enactment of that legislation to really see an effect on the incarceration rate. But I can tell you, and I know Patricia can as well, that it has made a significant difference in the number of filings. That is, they simply don't bust up as many meth labs as they used to. Now what happens is they're trucking in methamphetamine from Mexico, but that still is a victory for Oklahoma, because a lot of the problems that we are concerned with and that we saw on the commission dealt not only with the actual manufacture of the drug, but the atmosphere surrounding the manufacturer, children in the home, the dissolution of families, destruction of the environment. And with those meth labs gone, those problems are beginning to decrease.
Good. Patty, let's look at the last subject on the summit, not the last subject we'll talk about, but the last subject on the agenda, which is, is a major one, women's health. What is the summit going to do in regard to women's health? What are they going to be talking about? Who's going to be there?
Well, I will defer to Lou on who's going to be there, but again, the purpose of, one of the purposes of the summit is to educate people, educate both men and women in the area of health and just overall well-being. Unfortunately, Oklahoma is number one in the worst categories in the nation in health, and so that's something that we definitely need to be taking a look at.
We have a lot of dubious number ones.
We do. Unfortunately, we absolutely do.
Tell us who's going to be there.
Well, we're going to have a special appearance, and I frankly am not certain whether this was a live appearance or is some sort of magical technological appearance by Wanda Jones. She is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the United States Department of Health and Human Services. And she's going to, I believe, put the state of Oklahoma women's health in an overall national perspective and give us an idea of where we are and where we could be. Then we've got Ann Roberts, who's the Executive Director of the Oklahoma Institute for Child Advocacy, and she's going to come in and talk to us on adverse childhood events that then lead to later difficulties with health. We've got a woman coming in who will be speaking about unintended pregnancies. Of course, we have a very high rate of teen pregnancy, and I think that's really what they're getting at. And then Dr. Marie Bernard, who's chair of the geriatric section of the OU Health Sciences Center, will be talking about aging and mature health and health perspectives. This is something that the Commission has a very active interest in. We have a topical committee on health as well as one on women incarcerated, and they have been following something called Project Bones, which is a nationwide osteoporosis education and prevention project.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to interrupt you and ask you back to finish that sentence and that thought on another show because we've run out of time. Thanks so much to Lou Kohlman and Patty Presley for talking about the Women's Summit. There's more than we've been able to talk about, so register and go and attend and enjoy. We'll be right back.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
Thanks for watching. See you next week.
The preceding program was produced exclusively for the Cox Channel.